compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
Flour from another sack. It is a warm and windy spring in Karaganda. Man-made waterfalls are situated near the statue of Kanish Sampaiva, which was sparkling in the sun. The buses are approaching bus stops and citizens are in a hurry to do their daily tasks. Some of them are meeting guests. When painting the walls of this railway station, he often imagined that he would go home. It was the last stage and he was going to be released in Karaganda. It seems that after Stalin's death, the conditions improved to a certain extent. Pedro found himself here because he had really wanted to return home and he embarked on a dangerous adventure to escape from the USSR in a suitcase. He had his friend who had planned to get to the UN and tell the whole world that the Spaniards were not allowed to return to their country. This was in January 1948. Their sad story began when they encountered Soviet conditions because what they had previously known was propaganda. They wanted to run away from the Soviet Union and hid in the suitcases of Argentinian diplomats. Their aim was to reach the UN and announce the surnames of the Gulag Spanish prisoners. Chapter 1. Running from Threat. We can see an unremarkable landscape outside of the window. If we didn't hear the people speaking Spanish around us, we would think that we were on the way from Almaty to Astana. But we are going to the Spanish city of Larnavata. A train was moving, connecting kilometers with years, Kazakhstan with Spain, and Pedro Cepeda with his home. Here we can see the violinists Svetlana and Karlag exile Pedro already in Moscow. These are from the Cepeda brothers' childhood. Their mother did not have anything else except for these photos. She did not even see the letter he had written before his escape. Dear parents, I am writing these lines at a moment difficult for me. My life was not easy in this country. I have felt cold, hunger, and suffered. It would take too much time to tell you about everything. It started in 1936. The Spanish Civil War broke out and the Soviet country lived in accordance with the newspapers which published articles entitled, "They shall not pass, no pasaran." Even 5-year-old children raised their fists and every passerby who tried to give little Spaniards a present. Pedro and Rafael Cepeda were amongst those who were escaping from the Nazi threat. From spring 1937, over 3,000 Spanish children were saved from bombings launched by the Nazis and brought to the USSR. My mother was one of the children who was evacuated mainly from the northern Spain. In 1938, a lot of families were evacuated from these areas in order to save at least the children. Pedro Cepeda Sanchez was about 15 when he arrived in the Soviet Union, together with his 12-year-old brother, Rafael. Pedro was a cheerful boy. 15 special orphanages were constructed for refugees. They were in Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, and other cities. The best youth leaders, doctors, and teachers were there. As for their food, their menus even contained caviar. In the beginning, they had a very good life. The conditions there were better than the ones that the Soviet children had lived in. The Civil War came to an end and the plan of the USSR aimed at the bright socialist future of Spain was cancelled. Spaniards' dreams about returning home could not come true either. When Franco's regime was established in Spain, the Spaniards who had arrived in the Soviet Union to study turned out to be opponents.
Союзе они оказались по ту сторону лагеря.
Neither side needed these people. The brothers were separated and Raphael found himself somewhere near Leningrad. Later, Pedro found out that his younger brother was imprisoned for stealing food. It occurred during World War II when the abandoned hungry children joined bands trying to find food. One of them was taken to a prison camp. They had to work at a factory in Stalingrad. The children had felt hungry and cold. They saw that a lorry carrying uniforms was being unloaded and stole one of the uniforms. Pedro had already come of age, but he still remained listed as an unreliable person. He had been included in this list when he arrived. Dolores Iboruri, leader of the Communist Party, decided if a person was reliable or not. Iboruri asked a boy who his parents were. He answered that his father was a communist. "Who is your father?" she asked Pedro. His father was an anarchist. "You're flour from another sack," she said. It is a Spanish saying which means you are not one of us. He really was different. In order to protect the country which gave him refuge but still was not his homeland, from the Nazis, Pedro decided to commit a crime. He faked his documents. Instead of Sipeda, he wrote Sipedashvili, so he was enlisted as a Georgian. He was in the Black Sea Fleet during World War II, graduated from training, sang in the Moscow theatres and dreamt of meeting his parents again in Spain. After the war, people had an opportunity to go to countries of Latin America. However, Cepeda was not among those lucky people. They wanted to reunite with their families and parents who were in Spain. This desire was understandable. Then Pedro and José Tuñón developed an audacious and fantastic plan. People from the Argentinian embassy, where he worked as a translator, promised to help him. Chapter 2. Freedom for $20. Striking journalist and singer Pedro Cepeda did not tell this story to his friends from Karaganda. He recalled how he had built a local railway station, had slept near the legs of stone miners, and used coal as a pillow. However, he did not say a word about the matter, which an adventure novel could be based on. The plan was prepared very detailed, and it failed due to these very details. They did not obtain freedom because they lacked $20. My suitcase is heavier than yours, so I have to pay in addition. I need $110, but I only have 90. I must find $20, otherwise all will go to pot, squealed the Argentinian diplomat. Pedro's escape was delayed for 2 days. Only pilot Tuñón flew to Argentina. However, the suitcase where he hid was put upside down, and during the flight, José felt bad. A flight attendant noticed that suitcase. The plane had to return. They closed the Argentinian embassy and started arresting people there. The next day, Pedro went to get his tickets, and he was arrested.
На следующий день, чтобы забрать свои билеты в метрополе, его арестовали.
When they checked the suitcase where Tuñón had been found, inside of it, such things as a gun, travel documents of Tuñón Alberto José and Pedro Cepeda, 2 rubber heaters, one of which was filled with drinking water, and according to Tuñón, he was going to use the other one as a toilet. Pedro endured everything, including interrogation, torture, and isolation lasting for months. He had an advantage when he was beaten severely. He fainted. According to Anna, her father admitted only that he had wanted to run away. Pedro and Tuñón were sentenced to 25 years imprisonment for an attempt to run away in suitcases. Their friend Ramos, who had engaged in anti-Soviet conversations about queues in shops, was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. Their friend Fuster was given a 20-year sentence. He was arrested for being Pedro's friend, and he was not even going to run away. Anna gathered information about her father for many years. She recalled the stories he had told her and collected information in libraries and archives. After rehabilitation, looking through the documents, he found a reference given by Dolores. Such people should be hanged on the poles in Gorky Street. She used Dolores' words as the title for her book about her father. It is called You a Flower from Another Sack. They were little hostages of big politics. Among them, there were Pedro's friends in an orphanage and Pedro's brother too. His name, Raphael, was in the list of people who had survived the Leningrad siege. Chapter 3. No pasaran. In August 1948, the unfortunate fugitives were sent to different places. Pedro spent 5 years in the Inata coal mines, and after that he was sent to Karlag. He thought that Karaganda was a paradise after Inter. Although that paradise was behind barbed wire, they could listen to the radio. Jailers were not so cruel and the weather was better. The most important fact, that he met many fellow sufferers there. They gathered in a storeroom where they engaged in intelligent conversations about literature and culture. They mainly mined coal. They had a shovel. They had to shovel a few tons during a shift. When the circumstances changed for the better, the prison bosses started apologizing. They appreciated that thanks to these people, the homeland was provided with great amounts of coal. Pedro, who liked joking, said, if you use this coal, don't forget to prepare mittens and something warm. The prisoners went to work in the city in an open lorry where they had to squat and press against each other's backs. As a result, when they arrived, their legs were numb and it was near impossible for them to run. These houses will stand for more than a dozen years. Karaganda is proud of these houses, which were built by various people, including Spaniards. The Miner's Palace of Culture was giving The Barber of Siberia. It was one of the most favorite operas of Pedro Cepeda. A journalist of the socialist Karaganda newspaper, 1956 was the first year after his release. His voice was so deep that frozen windows covered in white frost rattled in the editorial office where he was singing in his rich baritone. However, sometimes it seemed that Pedro's voice would crack, and at moments he looked at us apprehensively in fear that his voice would fail. After that, we broke into deafening applause, tried to clink glasses with him and shouted, "No pasaran." Epilogue. The Unsent Letter. The colours of an old railway station, which was renovated, were growing pale. Karaganda was both a curse and a blessing for many people. The Spaniards and other nations were returning home from this city when their dream had finally come true. I want to take a risk and escape from this country illegally. If I don't do it, I'm afraid I can disappear as my brother did. I hope my audacious plan will succeed and we will be able to meet soon. However, if it fails, you will lose another son. His younger brother disappeared without a trace in 1946. His parents did not see Pedro and Raphael again. Pedro finally returned home after 31 years, a few months after his mother's death. She never saw her sons and grandchildren.